Did you know that the British government once secretly deported thousands of Chinese workers back to China, leaving their families to think they'd abandoned them? September the 3rd marks the 80th anniversary since the end of World War II, which in Asia also ended the 14-year-long war of Chinese resistance against Japanese aggression. It's great to see films being released that tell the Chinese story of World War II, such as Dead to Rights that retells the Nanjing Massacre, and the documentary The Sinking of the Lisbon Maru, and war drama Dongji Rescue that tell the story of the heroics of Chinese fishermen that put themselves at risk to save British prisoners of war who'd been left to die at sea by the Japanese. I'm also looking forward to the film 731, which recounts the horrors inflicted upon victims in Unit 731 in Harbin. This film is especially personal for me since I'm now living in Harbin, and my wife and her family are locals of this area. I've also previously visited the museum myself and made a video telling the important history of this museum. However, there's still more Chinese stories from World War II that are yet to be told, and that's why today I want to talk about Chinese merchant seamen in the UK. Few people know that in 1939, when World War II began, there were around 20,000 Chinese sailors living in the UK working for the Blue Funnel British Trading Company. These ships linked the major ports of Liverpool, Hong Kong, Guangzhou and Shanghai, so it was natural that they consisted of both Chinese and British sailors. After the war began, these Chinese sailors risked their lives for the war effort, working on merchant ships that were trying to bring food and other supplies into the UK. Their work was incredibly dangerous as the huge cargo ships were easy targets for German forces, and a lot of sailors lost their lives. However, despite Chinese and European sailors working together, they were treated very unequally. Chinese sailors often worked longer hours, yet received less shore time, which was effectively rest time between journeys. On top of this, Chinese sailors were even paid 2/3 less wages than local sailors of the same rank. And this wasn't even the worst of it. After the war ended, instead of being commemorated as heroes, the Chinese sailors were repaid with illegal deportations. That's right, just 2 months after the war ended, the British government started making secret plans to deport Chinese sailors. And in 1946, it is estimated that around 2,000 Chinese sailors were effectively kidnapped and forced onto a boat that took them back to China. Some of these sailors had even married local women and settled down and had children in Liverpool. Yet that still didn't stop the government from deporting them. Perhaps worst of all, the secret nature of the deportations meant that these Chinese sailors weren't even given a chance to say goodbye to their own wives and children before they were kidnapped and deported. The government's racist actions completely tore apart families, with many wives and children wrongfully believing that their husbands and fathers had simply fled and abandoned them. Without their husbands' salaries to support them, many leftover families even fell into poverty, since the government refused to provide them with support, as supporting these families would require the government to admit that it was actually responsible for the disappearance of these husbands. Thankfully, later generations of these Chinese sailors never gave up the fight for justice. They continued to tell the story of the disappearance of these sailors in 1946, and finally, in 2021, the Home Office agreed to investigate these illegal deportations. The investigation was completed in 2022, and for the first time, the Home Office finally admitted that they illegally forcibly deported Chinese sailors as part of a racist and prejudiced scheme. Whilst later generations finally know the truth about their fathers and grandfathers, the admission comes far too late to help the sailors who were forcibly deported or their poor wives who were left behind. Now, 80 years later, what we can do is share their story, because those sailors were heroes and should have been treated as such. Sharing these stories is vital to ensure that Britain learns from its mistakes. And if we want to strive for equality and defeat racism, then we must make sure that everybody knows about China's contribution to World War II in Europe. So I hope this video can educate more people about this topic. And hopefully, one day we can even watch a film retelling the story of these Chinese sailors.